Okay, it is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Reem Awad-Rashmawi. Reem is a professional genealogist and community historian who has been researching her own family for over 30 years. She is also an immigration attorney with over 27 years of experience representing clients in U.S. immigration matters. Reem specializes in Arab and Arab American genealogical and historical research, as well as U.S. records research, oral history, DNA analysis, adoptee and unknown parentage cases, and dual citizenship documentation. She is the founder of Photographs and Memories by Reem, through which she provides professional genealogical services, and the National Society for Arab and American Genealogy, where she currently serves as president. She also serves on the board of the National Genealogical Society. Reem holds degrees in international relations and sociology from UC Davis, a JD with a focus in international law, and a certificate in genealogical research from Boston University. She has completed advanced genealogical training and lectures nationally, including recent presentations on Arab genealogy at Roots Tech 2024 and 2025, the Arab American Public History Conference, and the Oral History Association annual meeting. And without further ado, I will pass the mic off to Reem. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's such a pleasure to be here today and to see so many people in the chat, seeing people coming from all over the place, all over California, Utah, and other places, and to see a few familiar names, but not too many. So that's great that so many of you have not heard me speak before on this topic or on Arab genealogy in general. So it is great to get going. If there's anything, I'm hoping you guys can see me and see my slides. And you won't have to, you only have one that you have sound. Hopefully that will work. We'll see how that goes. Okay, so I have some to talk today about my presentation goals. So Palestinians in the United States and the diaspora often maintain close ties to their family's town or village of origin, but not always. Sometimes I have come across many people who have lost touch with part of their story, part of their family. They may know one side or another. They also may have heard oral history or oral recitations of what some of the story is, but really want to document that. And this is a time that hopefully we can help you learn how to do that. So in this session, I will talk to you today about researching Palestinian ancestry using records in the US and abroad, and tracing lineages from today back through the Mandate period, British Mandate through Ottoman times, and also briefly talk about how DNA can help. Some of the things I will kind of skip through pretty quickly because there are other places that you can learn information about this, or I can refer you to other either webinars or places to find out more. So again, we're going to start by grounding our research, looking where to start, looking at diaspora resources, whether it's the United States or other places, or historic research. So before we talk about Palestine or Palestinian communities, we have to remember that those of us from Palestine here in the United States, we have to acknowledge that these lands that we are on are indigenous lands. All immigrant communities who are now in the U.S., unless you are come from a fully indigenous background, which is more and more rare, must acknowledge that these lands belong to someone else before we came in. We also need to remember that each the documents or the research archives or other things that we look at, we need to keep in perspective while we're doing our research, whether you're doing Palestinian research or any research. So I just want to bring that up in the beginning. I'm presenting this from Davis, California, where I live. Our region, the land, is the home of the Patwin people, and they have remained committed to the stewardship of their unceded land, and we need to honor that as we move forward with our research. We also have to remember that the history of the United States, as in many other places, is a settler colonial history, and there was a genocide of the indigenous people of that land. So again, I like to ground us in that before we begin in our research about our Palestinian ancestors. So let's talk about Palestinians. So for today's discussion, I'm going to be talking about Palestinian population primarily, or our ancestors probably as an Arab um, community. However, there are many other ethnicities and cultural backgrounds, but we all share a common experience and history for the region west of the Jordan River and east of the Mediterranean. So that is the area we're talking about. There's a plurality of religious beliefs and backgrounds, including various denominations of Islamic or Muslim religion, Christian, Jewish, other faiths. And due to history, there's also Palestinians all over the world. So when we talk about Palestinians, we're talking about everyone. And all of this experience, again, the common experience of being Palestinian. So I want to make that clear very from the outset of this presentation. The other key thing that I need to bring up at the very beginning of this presentation is that most Palestinian family stories include a story of the Nakba. The Nakba, which is translated to English as a catastrophe, is in 1948 with the loss of Palestine or the creation of the State of Israel. No matter when a Palestinian came to the US or any other country, or even if they stayed in their original town or village or city, the Nakba plays a key role in our family histories and its story, and mostly will be passed down through oral history. But sometimes it's too traumatic for those ancestors to share that story. And that's something we need to talk about how do we move beyond that. We'll touch it a little bit today, but it's something to think about. How do you deal with the traumas or what our parents, grandparents, ourselves may have gone through when we're doing this research. And depending on what generation you are, could be even great-grandparents that lived during the Nakba. And for also many Palestinians, probably all Palestinians today, the Nakba is considered to be an ongoing occurrence with the continued genocide and ethnic cleansing of Palestinians in Gaza and all over. With the end of entire family lines and loss of historic locations, archives, records, this is a time for many Palestinians to do whatever they can to document their family history. So I have a lot of people who are approaching me saying, I need to document. I don't want to just have the story. I want to write things down. I want to find documentation. I want to show my connection to Palestine. And it's something that's really important to a lot of us. And it's kind of maybe sparking some of the interest that younger generations are having in writing down and documenting their family history. So if any of you are here for that, we welcome you. We welcome everybody who's interested in researching our Palestinian family history. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I have some questions here related to the Nakba. We're going to talk a little bit about oral history interviews or interviewing our family. And when we're talking about the Nakba, what happened in the Nakba or the Nakba story, as sometimes it's called, things to think about is, do you know your family story from the Nakba? Like, did your family become a refugee? Where did they go? How did they get there? If your family stayed in their town or village, what happened to them? Did they leave and come back? Where they stayed? Stories like that. And also if the city or town is still there, because there are many that are no longer in existence. Some are covered with the forest or other things, park. So think about if your town is no longer there, what is there and what happened to the people who were there. So that is a story. Even if you don't have your family history, researching this is important. So I'm jumping right into that. So we talked about like historic and locality knowledge. So usually when I teach a genealogy course or do a webinar, that locality guides or locality knowledge or historic is part of it, but I usually put it at the bottom of this list. But for Palestinians, I think it's important to put us at the top of that list because we really need to know, a lot about about history and the locations as we do the research for genealogy. So all genealogists I know kind of say, where do you start? You start with you. You start with where you are and go backwards. You don't try to go to your great-great-grandfather or something and start researching. No, you need to start and move back. So what do you know? Information about your parents, your grandparents, writing it down, interviewing family members. What records do you have? For example, my father immigrated to the United States in late 1950s. I would think I wouldn't be able to find like US records besides a marriage record for him and a death record, but there were a lot of things that I was able to get immigration records, newspapers. We're going to talk about all those in a minute, but think about it. It's not, there are things there. You did make your mark where you are, and then your parents, grandparents, whoever immigrated here, wherever your story in the diaspora here in the United States began is, you need to document all those things. And then besides just interviewing family members is writing everything down. Like we you might have a story from your family. You say, oh, I know my family history, but did you write it down? So having it written down is so important and citing where that came from. For example, you got the information your grandmother told you 20 years ago, and she's no longer here to tell you that story. But you have it, you could write down what you know and then write, I was told this in a conversation with my grandmother on approximately this year or this date or whatever you know. Documenting, citing, it's so important because again, we're passing down oral histories, which we can tell the story. We remember things. We have an attachment to these stories, but they get lost if you do not write them down. And we know this. We all know how this works. So, and there's so many computer programs. If writing it on a Word doc, writing it on a notebook, putting it in a genealogy program. So there's a lot of things that you can do, but simply even just taking out recording it on your phone, recording it for yourself on your notes or emailing it to yourself. There's so many things you can do. Okay, so we're going again. I start with the historic considerations. We need to think about the Ottoman records. So the Ottoman Empire, they have administrative districts, which changed over time, but those records, we're looking at the British Mandate time, where the colonial period. I know when it was the British Mandate period, it's still colonial records because even though the British were kind of moving away from colonies as they were called previously, or with the League of Nations and all of that, still the mandate was intended to have the local populations have independent nation states, such as was happened in Lebanon or other countries. As we know, historically, it did not happen in Palestine, but those records and the connection to the British, we need to look at how that happened. So as I spoke of earlier, we have the Nakba. Prior to that, we had the partition agreements, or not agreements, but the partition of Palestine and the 1948 creation of the State of Israel, and then 1967, and 1948, and then the control of Gaza through Egypt, or the West Bank and East Jerusalem through Jordan. So again, we're thinking of this in a historic way for our work for researching where would records be found. 1967, when we had the Nakba, which is when the entirety of Palestine and the Sinai and the Golan Heights from Syria were then under Israeli control fully. Some people refer to this as a Six-Day War. This is, again, where are the records? We're looking at what happened to the people, our ancestors, or even ourselves, if that's when you came to the United States. So I'm not going to get into other historic kind of conversations here because I could spend the next, I could spend my whole life talking about the history of Palestine. But when the whole point of this is to say, where will you find an archive? Where will you find what types of records? What languages are you looking at? All of these things are important when you look for genealogical research and historical considerations. Okay, so one of the first things when you say start with yourself, what do you have? What do you have around you? A lot of things that we have are photos. So I gave an example here. These pictures are Palestinian. These are grandparents of Palestinian Americans. All of these are. So I always, when I show pictures like this, people are like, wow, that's a variety. We have we have a woman who's here wearing a thobe. Gentleman dressed more Palestinian with a tarbush or a fez on the hat. We have another one wearing hatta gal, the head covering. Another set wearing more modern looking clothes, and then we have a Palestinian grandfather who is a priest. So we see a big big variety. I mean, you probably would not guess what religion all of the different, except for obviously the priest, but a lot of times, you wouldn't know what religion any of these people are. It's just more what time frame the pictures were taken, or which family, or even what portrait studio was taken. There is a book, by the way. It's called The Arab Imago or Majo. I'm not exactly sure. It's a social history of portrait photography by Stephen Shaheen, Mishihi. And he, in this book, talks about the different portrait studios during the Ottoman period, and some of it is, it talks about Palestine. And so what if you have a stamp on the back of some of these pictures you have? Maybe you figure out, like, maybe helping dating the pictures, and it helps you figure out who the people are. One thing I would want to talk about is scanning. It's so important that we digitize. I mean, this digitization, whether it's your personal papers or whether it's an archive, it's so important that we're digitizing these photos and looking in the front and back and adding data like metadata or information, where they came from. If there's messages, sometimes they're like postcards. You can get them also using photos for oral history interviews. So our memory, like I might not remember what I ate 2 days ago, but if I look at a picture of myself in my childhood, I could tell you this is from this occasion. So these are used in a lot of ways to spark memories. And then photos, if you don't know who are in the pictures, you have these pictures and you don't know who they are, there's many ways to try and figure it out, even if you don't have family around. So social media, posting them either publicly or privately on groups, emailing them to family members. It could be done privately if you don't want, or publicly if you're asking. There are even, we're going to talk about Palestinian American heritage groups that put out pictures, and there's a lot of like history of Palestine kind of things that put out pictures of families that know who they are, and they ask people, do you know who these people are? Things like that. Documents, I'm using the example here from a client who I appreciate allowed me to share these publicly. These are documents for Ziad Shamia, and he passed away, but he was a California resident in the Bay Area. And but there can be so many documents you could have. So I personally would have my California birth certificate, my marriage certificate, and my California driver's license. But my ancestor might have documents that are Palestinian, that are Jordanian, that are Egyptian, that came from the Ottomans, that came from the Israelis. I mean, there's just so many different potential documents. We have, a passport. It could be a laissez-passer. It could be a different refugee travel document. It could be a Jordanian passport. It could be identity documents. Could be a Hawiya, a Jordanian family book. There's just so many. Hawiya as an ID. So there's so many different things that you could have as documentation, and scanning these and putting them in your computer, putting them on a Word doc, or transcribing. There's so many different ways to go through and look at the documents we have that will present our family's history. And again, looking at dates, looking at places, what are on these documents? Okay, oral histories. This is the same Ziad Shamia who I shared the documents with a moment ago. Before I listen to his, I have a little video clip for you, but let me just say, as we know, most of our history that we have, at least today, is passed down through these stories, right? Through family stories. Many times it's just the patrilineal line, right? So when I was a kid, a lot of Palestinians have this, when you memorize your name, right? So I was taught, obviously I knew my name, my father's name, which is legally my middle name, and a lot of people have that. And then the next name is my grandfather, great grandfather. So I could read off to you my family name through the ancestor who came to the village my father was from. And then I know the name of the other village and where he came from, and his father's name, and why he came, the story at least that I know of why he came to, why he left that village, came to another village, where his brother went. We actually were able to connect with family in the other village. So it's just like those stories we know. So so many times I'll talk to somebody, I think I said earlier, who I will say, do you want to learn about how to do Palestinian genealogy, or do you want to learn how to record your family history? And they'll say, I know my family history. I'm good. I'm like, okay, so do you know your grandmother's father's name? And they're like, maybe not. Or do you know this story? Or or do you know beyond kind of what happened to the brother of your grandfather? Things like this. These stories make up our ourselves. It's not just our patrilineal line, which is important, and it's a good way to follow the family name and the family history. And a lot of people use that to trace from a tribe or a like it really depends. But I think our story is broader than that. So I'm hoping that I can inspire you to know your full family history and to look at it beyond that, because actually there are ways to figure it out. And a lot of people don't want to do that because they also think that they can't, but that there really are ways. Hopefully, and so, there are some ways at least. Um, so if you know somebody to interview, the family story, I'm hoping you can hear this. I'm not sure exactly it's going to work, but we tried it earlier.
I came to New York because my sister was there. We stayed there for 2 or 3 weeks. Then my friends here in San Francisco sent me so much letters. Come visit us, come visit us. Then I came, I found difference between New York and San Francisco with the weather. And so I have so much friends. I decided to stay in San Francisco.
So that was just a very brief clip from a much, much longer interview that had a much more in-depth conversation. And it's wonderful that we have this video, not only to get the family history, but now we have these videos for his family to cherish and pass down to other generations. So, but let's say you don't have a family you can interview. What do you do? Well, there are oral history interviews, at least until you find people to interview. There are oral history interviews of Palestinians all over the internet that you can find. There's sites through the Arab American National Museum has oral history digital scrapbook. Palestine Remembered online has oral history interviews. AUB, so the American University Beirut has a Palestine oral history project. There's the Nakba archives. There are universities such as Duke. Duke University has Palestinian oral history project. There are just so many different places online that you can find oral history interviews of Palestinians. And you can search for a family name, you can search for a city, you can search for other ways to document and to hear stories of the town or family that you come from, even if you don't have direct family to interview yet. Obviously, hopefully in the future, you will meet up if you do not have family that you can. Again, this presentation is talking to all types, Palestinians all over. So you're not necessarily, like some of us are lucky enough, as I said, to go back and see their family and grow up with their family, but a lot of people are not. So I'm hoping that all of you will get something out of this presentation. Oh, I do want to say when you're doing those research, by the way, make sure you understand spelling and naming issues. And again, we can talk about it this presentation, but I've done other presentations that you can find online that talk about names and spelling and different ways of searching using search engines, that can give you better results when you're looking for the things that you are trying to find. And I guess, yeah, last thing on oral histories, there are even books. There are a lot of books where people have done oral history interviews and they have transcribed them or written about them in academic or other books. So I'm going to really quickly talk about U.S. Records because, again, there's many webinars that really focus on that. My focus for this talk is going to be on newspapers and immigration records, but census records, vital records, court land records, religious. I mean, there's so many different things that you can find. If your family's, even if, like I said, like with my father who had just come to the U.S., there were still records for him from when he came in the 50s. But again, look through and see what you can find. So newspapers, I'm going to give you a quick example. There's many papers. Some people just look on newspapers.com. So newspapers.com is one place, newspapersarchives.com, chronicling America. There are many webinars on the different places you can find newspapers. So I'm going to give you some examples specifically besides those when you're looking for Palestinian ancestors. So for example, so the first one was Arabs on LI, which is Long Island. It was an article about several Palestinian families and their life there. This was from 1974. This other one, Peddling Without a License, is this was a article that was shared through a archive through the Khairallah Center, which is the Center for Lebanese Diaspora. And Khairallah Center is a place to keep in mind when you're doing Palestinian research, even though it says Lebanese, because again, historically, you want to look, people are looking at the area of the Levant. So some things that may be from Palestine or from Syria or that whole area of the Levant is under Lebanon or under Syria. So there are a lot of information about Palestine in these archives or in this center that is labeled Lebanese diaspora. But again, we cross over boundaries historically, as we talked about a little bit earlier. So this one was clipping about the J.A. Salami, who was arrested for peddling, and it discusses that he was where he was from and what happened with him. So just something to keep in mind. And it specifically in this article from states that he is from Palestine. So this is another area that a lot of people forget is there were Arab newspapers in English and Arabic in the United States. So this is Emirat al-Gharb, which was a newspaper that was published in New York. And as you can see from here, there's an article on earthquake in 1927 in Palestine, and it talks further about which towns were affected and what things had happened. So again, not only are you looking at for family members, you're looking at locations, you're looking at what happened. So if your family had, to see what happened, what they experienced during that time, sometimes you would have an interview where someone talked about an earthquake or talked about a certain disease passed through Palestine. So you can find actual documentation. So you're documenting the oral histories of your family with papers or primary sources that you can then add to the story when you write it down. Okay, this is immigration records. That's the other U.S. record I'm going to talk about because it's discussed a lot. So there are many places that you can look at immigration records. We did a full webinar on how to look for immigration records through the National Society for Arab and Arab American Genealogy that was mentioned earlier. And so I can't spend all day or this whole webinar on that, but immigration records are important because they help people figure out sometimes if they don't know where they're from, but there's also other reasons to look at immigration records. Excuse me. So obviously there's places like Ancestry or Family Search or other places like that you're going to find, you could potentially find immigration records, National Archives. I'm sorry, but you have to also realize, I'm sorry, I'm going to drink a sip of water for a second. That not all records are online. So, and not all records that are online are indexed. So we need to think about that when you're researching. And then there's the USCIS genealogy program or the FOIA requests, depending on when people came. And then local court records. Local court records because not all naturalizations were actually recorded in the federal National Archives or through USCIS, depending on the timing of the naturalization. So you might actually have to physically go to a court, a local court. So for the National Archives, I'm going to really quickly show you that this catalog, you can look for things up. There are videos on the National Archives website that allow you to kind of walk you through how to use it. And since I started doing this, it has changed a lot. Currently, They are doing a lot of things with OCR, which is optical character recognition, so like text recognition through AI. And it's allowing us to get a lot more access to seeing what is there. But again, not everything there, well, everything's indexed, but not everything is online digitized. So you can still go. So I'm going to show you really quick. This is something that was found, the case that I was talking about earlier, that I was able to pull the alien file or the A file for the grandfather and the great grandmother of the person that I was researching for. And we found an original marriage certificate in the immigration file and a picture of the grandfather and the great grandmother of who both immigrated separately and later, and the whole file, which had so much information. But this is something that they had never seen these pictures or this document. So that was something that was in the immigration file, but we didn't have to go anywhere else but to go to the National Archives here in the San Francisco National Archives in San Bruno. Another place to look is Palestinian American heritage organizations. So there are several that, some more organized than others, but mostly either on websites or Facebook groups or through their newsletters. There's a lot of information about family histories for people in the United States. Besides these heritage organizations, there are also religious organizations such as churches or mosques. When I was growing up, I know our local mosque or Islamic association, I believe, it had opened as a mosque at that time. I can't remember if it had or not. It currently has, but had, for example, like articles about so-and-so graduated high school and these are their parents and these are where they come from and that kind of a thing. So things like newsletters, it's not just vital records, it's not just birth, death, marriage records. You can find newsletters and other things that may tell more about your family story from those organizations. So other diaspora research. So the reason this is important is because as Palestinians, as I'm assuming all of you know, is Palestinians are all over the world, like we said from the beginning. And our story isn't just an immigrant story always where someone came to the US. Like one shot, raised their family here, were, visited, but that's it. Sometimes that is the story, but a lot of times it's not. A lot of times there's a refugee story, there's a refugee status, there's things that you need to look at that there are many ways to immigrate. Besides going back and forth, there's also coming in, going to Central and South America. I'm gonna give you an example in a minute, and coming up through the border crossings. Another thing is that, like I said earlier, there are many places potentially to research. I'm gonna give you an example of a family. So the family is a Palestinian American ancestor. So it was a great grandfather of the person that I was speaking with. They had came to the U.S. early 1900s, enlisted in the U.S. military, returned to Palestine after they were done without obtaining U.S. citizenship, came back and forth, was unable to get U.S. citizenship at the time because they did not stay in, they stayed out of the country too long and came back in. So usually at the time they would have gotten it through their military service, but that did not happen after World War I in this case. Died in Palestine. Then their children in 67 became refugees in Lebanon. One son went to school in Lebanon. Another went to school in Egypt. A daughter married in Jordan, moved to Kuwait, and then back to Jordan. And then one of the sons went to Europe, went to England, and then they all ended up in the United States. So if you're thinking about researching, again, it's not just the story of coming here to the US. There's a lot of places. There was a journal article in 2023 which talked about UNRWA family archives and records because they're hopefully able to be kept to show connection to as a refugee status and then the descendants. AUB, so American University of Beirut and Cairo both have yearbooks online. So I was able to find for an ancestor for someone in a AUB yearbook. There is things like the National Archives in the UK. There's records all over for different locations when we are talking about Central and South America or Jordan or Europe. It's not Obviously, we say it's not easy. I'm not trying to discourage you because I'm actually trying to encourage you because there are so many places to look for records. It's a lifelong journey, but it is something that but that can be done at least in some sense, hopefully. Um, Again, so like let's say they went to Brazil or Chile, they have like there's business directories and immigrant directories or community clubs or civil registration or church records or there's just so many things that we need to think about. What could we find? I've talked to a genealogist who does do work for Central and South America, and she said we have so many Palestinians that that we should collaborate and look at like these records and how the immigration story is different than a lot of people think. So now I'm going to spend the rest of the time talking about researching. We're going to call it researching the homeland, Palestine. Where do we find documents? We figured out where we are going, or we're trying to figure out where we're going. So there's some options here. I want to give you some key tips before we dive into the records. Personal relationships are key. Okay, so even if you don't know anyone from there, you can you can make connections. People want to connect with family. People want to connect with people from the same town. I mean, I don't know how many of you, but I know how many times there are people we're in a where you live and you go to school and there's one Palestinian. You might be someone might be Muslim from Jerusalem and somebody might be Christian from Jaffa, okay? But you're cousins. It doesn't matter because you're Palestinian and everyone's like, "Oh, my cousin, my cousin, my cousin." That isn't good. That's not good for genealogy, but people want to connect with our families, right? And so we want to connect with people from where we come from. There are some places in the US that have, huge communities from the same town. I mean, Lodi in California, San Francisco, there's so many places that have like kind of enclaves of people from the same village or town or city. But so if you don't know people, if you didn't grow up within that atmosphere of knowing family or knowing family in Palestine, it's good to like connect with people, and it helps with the working reaching out. So you might be reaching out to, let's say you're reaching out to an archive in Palestine, you may be able to get some information, or a organization like Dar Sabag from Bethlehem. They do research for people from Bethlehem, Beit Jala, Beit Sahur. So, you know, that's a direct, you don't have to have connections. You can contact them, right? But like if you're going to, let's say, you want to talk to a mukhtar of a village that you're asking for specific things that you're trying to find out if your family has, because a lot of times we're not going to be able to get it from the Israeli government. So let's say you are able to get it from, I don't know, some sort of registry or a person who has documents that historically hold for that town or village. They're not going to just give you something for you to come up and ask them. You have to know people, you have to talk to people, you have to show who you are and how you're connected before anybody will provide information to you. So you have to think about this. The other thing I want to just emphasize before we get a little bit further is that some people say they don't want to do the research because of language barriers. Let's say you don't speak Arabic, you don't read Arabic, you don't, obviously, Ottoman Turkish is a big stumbling block for a lot of us. Um, but there are ways around it with technology, with relationship building, for example, I have reached out to university students to do translations. Google Translate, I know it's not great, but there's a lot of other AI things that are building. I had talked about, I think, the Khairallah Center before. They're working on AI that will allow to upload documents in Arabic that will be then returned to you with transcriptions and translations from through an AI source. The Arab American National Museum. A lot of places are working on AI projects that potentially could help with us, whether it's handwritten or typed documents. The future is brighter. People are digitizing, so people are getting, documents that we thought didn't exist actually do. Not always, but sometimes. So digitization is huge, and that's really helpful. So that's something that can really allow us to have options for our research when we're doing this. So don't give up because of a language barrier. So I'm going to give you a few resources that I use all the time and that I would encourage you to use. So family trees. I'm not going to, again, speak about like Ancestry and Family Search and other places where you can build your tree. I use all of those, and I use them for Palestinian and other Arab research. But those, again, there's a lot of places besides me today that can talk about that, right? But I'm going to share with you some resources or places you might want to look. So I'm going to start. I said I'm not going to talk about family search, but the lower tree is from about as for the Shaheen family, which was on display. This is a family from Birzeit, Palestine, and it was on display during the Roots Tech conference in Salt Lake in March of this year, and it was great to go in and see, Arabic and a Palestinian family featured on one of the screens. It was, made me very happy to see that. And so that's an example. Family Search does have some other family trees in their archives or in their library in Salt Lake. Most of those are not available online. So you either have to get a researcher or somebody to get them, or go to Salt Lake to their library to see that, or even just but some of them have some things online, but not a lot. The Khalidi family tree is online because they have a library, but they also, some people see the library and go, okay, that's fine, but there's also family tree available. This one is written out in a lineage versus the tree, the physical tree. Say So Family has an online archive that they have up. They have a website for the Say So Family archive, and they also have documents. Believe it's on the Columbia University website, but they have a family tree on their site for that family. Abu Snena family tree is on Palestine Remembered. Again, and it might not be your line, but it could be something gives you more information. Again, Palestine Remembered, that's another resource that sometimes people upload trees or information about a family or about a town on. Of course, on the right, we have the Ramallah, its history and genealogy book, which was written by the late Aziz Shaheen, and that is a book that was published in 1982, but then the Ramallah Federation has now taken that information, put it on, that book's in Arabic, but they've taken it, made in English, inputted all the information in English, and then had people from Ramallah update that. So it's updated through, I don't know if it's updated through today, but they do it regularly. So that's, these are varying ways of seeing trees. Again, there are some in English, there are some in Arabic, there are some, so there are, but again, there are ways to get around the language issue. So looking for, searching online, finding these, changing your screen to translate it to English, looking up things, transferring names through AI, from writing them in English, having them in Arabic, searching in Arabic even if you don't read it. It does help. There are ways around it. There's also a family name book, or the Glossary of Palestinian Families. This book, so for example, when I saw the tree from the Seso family, I looked in this book. I was able to find it listed twice, and it has results from Gaza, from Beersheba, so Beersheba. It shows that this family, these are the two places that this family is found, and it primarily connects to what is seen in the records, but again, or of the story online, but there are other things that were on there. But it was interesting to me that it very clearly showed that this was a family from Gaza and the Gaza region, and that's where some of that is most noted. So there are, if you see, there are kind of footnotes that I did not include here that explain more about that. But so a lot of families are listed, and you can find, for example, if you don't know, the family name, but you don't know where they're from. Again, that's going to be hard for, let's say, I've had somebody, the last name is Khoury. Khoury means priest. There are a lot of people with that last name that doesn't necessarily mean it comes from a specific town or village. So again, these are places to look. These are all resources. It doesn't mean it's going to solve your whole family story. Another thing to look at is maps. And again, we're talking about history. We're looking at family history, connections to places. So this map here is 1884 map of the Ottoman Empire, which states Palestine across it. The other one is an 1843 map of Palestine. Both are found at the Library of Congress through the Library of Congress website. As mentioned earlier, Ottoman rule of Palestine had different administrative districts, which changed from Damascus or Syria or like Jerusalem, Jaffa, Nablus. There's different districts over different times. So again, you need to look at the maps, you need to look at the history to see where you're going to see records. And they also, some of the maps use English names like Al-Khalil, like Hebron, some use Al-Khalil, Al-Quds, Jerusalem. Even these, both of these in English are written Al-Quds instead of Jerusalem, but, or including Jerusalem, but they also can give you ideas of where to look, specifically what cities are next to each other if you're not more familiar, or what cities were next to each other or listed in the time of the Ottoman Empire or the British Mandate, etc. Other places, other things to think about is on the maps, some maps I've looked for villages that didn't have the village, but then I've looked up in other ways, like Palestine, like Bilad Sham, like Syria, like the Ottoman Empire, Palestine, or even the Holy Land. I mean, some of the maps are just called the Holy Land or Taras Sancta or Palestina. So again, we need to be creative in our research and look at the historic along with the family history information. Other places to find maps that might have more detail is Dr. Salman Abu-Sitta's books, atlases, the Interactive Encyclopedia of the Palestinian Question, PAL Open Maps, which is like, I guess, British Mandate and other areas, Palestine Land Society, I said Library of Congress, the Davis Rumsey map collection, Searching Palestine, or Palestine Remembered, as I mentioned earlier. There's a lot of places that, again, we need to be more creative. We're not just going on Ancestry. So that's what I'm trying to say. I love Ancestry. I use it all the time, but there are places, or Family Search, but we need to look beyond that. We're not just putting a date and a name on a tree and saying, I can't find anything. We need to do our research, be really thorough in the places. We say with genealogy, reasonably exhaustive research. So we want to look and think of all the different places that we might potentially find information about our families online, but also in person, calling, reaching out. I'm going to give you an example here. These are village books. Rochelle Davis had a book back in 2010, Palestinian Village Histories, Geographies of the Displacement. And so in the back of this book is an index. I mean, the book also is a good read, but the back of the book has lists of village history books. Center for Palestine Studies in Columbia has books online. This book right here I bought in Bethlehem. It's the tour of the history of Beit Jala by Khalil Shoka, who is the research director for Dar Sabah Center in Bethlehem. And I believe this book is also in Spanish. So, but there's also there's some books at the Family Search Library that are being scanned. There's different places. When I've gone to Palestine and when I've gone to visit family, I've always said, do we have a book? Is there something? Can you grab it for me? Kind of a thing. So I collect the books from my town that I think I'm going to start getting from. I did start getting them from other places. So again, there are some only in Arabic, but there's some in different languages, like I said, in Spanish or English, and asking people, asking people, are you going? Can you check for me? Can you check out a bookshop? Things like that. I gotta move a little faster because I think I'm almost running out of time. I'm almost got through most of this. There's so much. I could talk to you guys for hours of different places. I'm just trying to give you some brief ideas, at least to get everybody started. So digitizing is a big thing. As people know, that there's preservation, there's a push for preservation, there's a push for archiving. These are some archives. I did already mention Dar Sabah. The Khaza'in archive is another place that has online. This is the picture of the website on the side, that they have different documents that people have submitted. Families have submitted family papers, other things like that. Birzeit University Digital Archive, Palestinian Museum Digital Archive. There's just so many different things, places you can look for archives. Again, you might not find anything, and there are tricks to finding stuff because searching in English versus searching in Arabic may end up with different results. But there's a need to document our histories, right? So there's a recent video put out or interview through the Archives and Heritage for Palestine seminar series from the Middle East Librarian Association that just happened. I believe it was earlier this year, where Dr. Abdulatif Abu Hashim I'm trying to remember who it was, but I believe that's who did an interview in English to talk about archives in Gaza and um, how people, one of the conversations was people were going to trying to save archival material from kind of the rubble of libraries or family homes or things like that. So, I mean, like, it is so important. Preserving our family history is important. It's something that we can do to document Palestine, but also document ourselves. And I've talked to somebody who told me that documenting, learning more about her family history, especially when she was disconnected from it, it just made her feel more connected. She always kind of felt out, displaced, but knowing the family history and documenting that family history just meant the world. So it's not just names and dates and places on a tree. It's also really it's part of who we are. So one of the key things that since Ottoman records or Ottoman times was a big part of Palestinian, history. One of the things that we really need to look at is Ottoman records, and we do have access to those records for at least census records on Family Search. So I'm going to show you a little bit. There's two ways to research it. One is by location, and one is by the index. So when I first did this, I would do it by location, and I would insert into their catalog Palestine. Most of the time I would put in a town or village, but to get to the census records, I would go through the catalog and get the Nafus registry for Palestine, as you can see here, the one that's highlighted in purple. And then when you clicked on that, for example, I'm going to give you an example from Ramallah, from the Jerusalem district, and then the sub-district for Ottoman was Ramallah that I was looking for. The Ottoman census records are broken down by religion, and so they show, like, for example, here you have Muslim, you have Roman Catholic, you have Greek Orthodox, you have, like, so it's broken down. That's how the census was taken. And then if you go further, the research, I'm going to show you, oops, right, here we get to this part. So from your home computer, you cannot look at those records. You can only see that there are records, there are, frames right there. So you have to be either at a family search center or a family search affiliate library to have access to these. So just to let you know that you can go to Family Search online, you can find where a local one is near you, and you can go to look for that. And so this is what it looks like when you actually get through to the site at a Family Search Center or affiliate library. And I'm referring back since I have permission to share this. So when I did the research for Ziad Shamia, this was looking for his, going back. So it'd be his grandfather, not great, I'm sorry, his grandfather. And so what I had already done, interviewing the family, looking at the Ramallah family tree, looking at all this, I wrote a group sheet, put it on my computer on one side, and then I went, actually in this case, page by page by page, and found this Ottoman census record for this family, right? And so I was so excited. We found it. It was there. We were able to match it up. And one of the way I did it was by reading the names. Since I did this, Family Search has indexed those records. So instead, you would put the name in their search. You can put it in English. It's fine. You pick the area. You do the search. It came up. The right record came up. Unfortunately, currently the records are not fully indexed appropriately. I mean, that is normal with any indexing. People put typos. In this case, when they were indexed, so the census records show like alive or dead on the parent's name. So it has the person's name, it has their father's name, it has their mother's name, it has their birth year. Some of them. I'm not going to get into all the different types of Ottoman census records, but let me give you an example for that one, right? So in that case, the first person on the record is the head of the family or the oldest male person, right? And then it has their parents. Unfortunately, some of the transcriptions included, in this case, the person's name was Ziada Hanna Nassar Shamia, right? And so they have it listed as Ziada Nassar. So it got me to the right spot, but again, it's not exactly right. So I like still to go page by page by page through the records, but as things get indexed, like fixed, Family Search is actually working on the fixing these indexes. It's amazing. I'm just so thrilled. I mean, there's just so much more we can find. And plus, if you see on the right, there's like similar records. So there potentially some of the records that like it will lead me on the side to other records that could be from that person. And again, I searched in English. Then I could take this and then on my screen change it from Arabic to English and have it translated, and it would pop over to give me more information. So we are getting way further. Like even just a year, 2 years ago, this would not have happened. And I can't think of what's going to happen in the future. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of go through. I think I have about -1 minute, so I'll be really quick on the rest of it. This is an example of church records that are available online. There's a baptismal record here from Mar Louis El Malek, so Saint Louis King Maronite Church in Haifa from 1867. There's a whole list going on. I mean, these are like pages and pages and pages of church records. The other one, the one on the right that's in has Latin letters. It's Holy Family Catholic Church in Rimal area of Gaza, 1941. These are, again, I believe baptismal records. I'm trying to look what they were. I didn't write it down, but I believe that's what that is. And then the other one here, we have the Forefathers Orthodox Church in Beit Sahur from 1924. So there are church records available online. Not all of them. There are some. Again, some of it is online. Some of our work is online, and some of it is going to calling, asking, finding out where you can go, finding out where they are, but they are not all gone. Like we have ways to document our family history. Islamic court records. These are another place. This is, I believe this is a screenshot from the University of Jordan Library Archive, which has records going back, potentially for example, this record is from the 1500s. So there are records. I don't believe they're fully online, but I believe that they are being digitized. There are people working to get this more online. Other university libraries, I believe Brown University has Ottoman records. There are a lot of like from Nablus. There's things that can happen that you don't have to go all the way to, to Palestine or for Ottoman records to Turkey or other places. There's more and more access to these. Are they all available, easy to access right now? No. Will they be? I hope so. And I think we're getting more and more access to them. Again, British Mandate period. I say colonial era instead of just the British Mandate period because some of these documents are not just during the Mandate periods. For example, this Palestine Exploration Fund booklet is from 1908. So that's prior to the Mandate, but there was a lot of British involvement in Palestine prior to the Mandate. So this doesn't have necessarily family history documents. I mean, we all know documents that we're using for family history were not created for family historians. They were created for whatever purpose they were for. But just like any other genealogist or family history enthusiast, we are using those documents to do our research. So for example, this had a whole section on names. I believe it was Nablus. I can't remember. Of a whole bunch of names of people in the area. It's written in English. It has kind of translations for these names, what each name meant. Not all of it's accurate, but it was very interesting. But you also have to take it from the perspective of the time they were created. The Palestine phone directories, this one here is from 1946. There were 3 areas divided up, Jerusalem, Jaffa, Tel Aviv, and Haifa, that have varying businesses. Census for Palestine, 1931 is not necessarily, it doesn't list like names and dates like we think of census records, but it does list the towns and villages and cities and the breakdown of the populations by religion. So there's things that will help us think of who was there and who is no longer there or what our family makeup was if you know the name. I'm almost done. Books, resources. So again, family, Facebook villages. A lot of times current day villages have Facebook groups to have announcements. It might be some way to DM or reach out to them. Family websites, books and biographies. Again, the Interactive Encyclopedia of Palestine Question has biographies. You can look on WorldCat to search for books. Rediscovering Palestine by Bashara Durrani, who has a huge section in the back, a list of where his sources were from, like family papers that were scanned and documented, or that hopefully are now, I think, available through Brown, potentially. Again, not all of this is, for sure. I mean, even cookbooks. So Reem Assil's book, Arabiya, recipes from the life of Arab and diaspora, she puts her family story in the cookbook. A lot of times, food and a lot of cookbooks that are about Palestine have family stories in them. That's, it might not be a bad thing. Articles on This Week in Palestine. If you go to This Week in Palestine, they have some family history articles, some things about Palestinian history and specific families. DNA, I know that's going to be a big thing. I'm ending my talk about DNA, but a lot of people get involved in genealogy or family history by taking a DNA test. It's, it's the current technology that's bringing people in, right? But you have to realize ethnicity estimates are not the main research tool, and sometimes they're very far off, and sometimes they're pretty good. But I mean, I don't use that in my genealogy research. When I'm researching for somebody, I can look at an ethnicity estimate to be like, okay, there's nothing in there that relates to this. Maybe there's an issue. But other things, they are not necessarily. I've seen them change. I've seen the definitions change over, I don't know how many years. It's good to look at, but I kind of look at it as an entertainment value because the percentages change. It does give us some idea, but not fully. The matches are what you use. You see who you match to, where they're from, where their trees are coming from, how you break it down. That's the important thing. Autosomal DNA, that's testing. There's different sites. I use Ancestry the most because there are more people there. I was surprised when my dad did his DNA. He immigrated here. His family was not. He was the only one or the first one to immigrate here, but he had so many matches. I was surprised, and so I find that more and more people are doing DNA tests. Y-DNA, which is the male line, or mitochondrial DNA tests. Female line, we do them mostly on family tree DNA. And one great thing about that is family tree DNA has group projects, and there is a Palestine DNA group that you can connect with people and connect. They have an administrator who, just does a lot of great work. And so I think, looking at that. So where to go next? Again, back to the beginning, get started, write stuff down. Let's see what you can find. Rewatch this presentation after you've started, or other presentations. Connect with us at the National Society for Arab and Arab American Genealogy. We have, for members, we have every other month we have gatherings where people can talk about what they're stuck on, what are we working on. It's really helpful to hear from the way other people are writing or documenting or researching their family histories. And this is for Arabs in general. And there's a lot of people who come who not necessarily identify as Arab, but they are from an Arab country, and they may be Assyrian or Armenian or other things, but they are interested. All of the same research process is the same as they're working with us. So it's great to see so many people working on their research together. And then, of course, you can ask me, you can connect with me. These are different ways that you have. I'm on social media. So I have Twitter on here, which is X. I guess this is an old thing. I'm not very much on it. So it's best to send me an email, message me on LinkedIn, or just check out my blog. Also check out the National Society for Arab and Arab American Genealogy, NASAB's blog, or webinars. The webinars are free online. The recordings are for members, but you can watch the live ones free. It's open to anyone. I hope you all will get started on your research. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Reem. That was incredibly engaging and informative. And now we're going to go ahead and open it up for questions. But before we do, I'm going to stop the recording.